You are listening to The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards with Matthew Childs and Cindy Paragill.
Hello, my name is Matthew Childs and this is Consumer Protection, a series from The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards. Standards benefit consumers by tackling important issues such as safety, inclusion, customer service, sustainability, and digital privacy and security. They are a valuable tool in the consumer protection toolkit, working alongside regulation, policy, and enforcement. However, it is vital that consumers are involved in standards development to make sure they address real problems faced by real people. This is where CPIN comes in, an independent organisation of consumer experts, supported by BSI and the UK government. For more than 70 years, it has championed consumer protection through standards. CPIN reps are trained volunteers who represent consumers in standards development to ensure that standards address those real problems, giving a voice to consumers of all ages, abilities, genders, and cultures. Each episode of the series explores a specific standard, which is responding to a real-world issue and the benefits it brings to consumers. How PAS 7055 for button and coin battery safety is protecting consumers, especially children, from serious harm. How ISO 22458 for consumer vulnerability is being used to promote fairer and more inclusive services. And how ISO 21800 will tackle improving consumer understanding of online terms and conditions. 3 brilliant examples of consumer protection through standards, and the importance of the consumer voice in standards making. The publication of the series coincides with BSI proudly hosting the 45th meeting of ISO COPOLCO, ISO's Consumer Policy Committee, in London. With members from 123 countries, ISO COPOLCO advises on standards development from a consumer perspective and promotes global consumer involvement in standardisation. Many key standards developed through ISO COPOLCO, including ISO 22458 and ISO 21800, originated from UK proposals via CPIN, reinforcing the UK's leadership in shaping international consumer protection. This episode of the series features Peter Stoneley, trading standards consultant and CPIN rep, talking about ISO 21800 for clearer online terms and conditions. Currently at the draft international standard stage and due for publication later this year, ISO 21800 is aimed at improving the clarity, accessibility and comprehension of online terms and conditions presented to consumers. It sets out requirements and best practices for organisations to ensure that consumers can easily understand what they are agreeing to when using digital services or purchasing online.
This is Cindy Paragill here with a reminder that you can rate, review, and subscribe to The Standard Show wherever you get your podcasts. And you can get in touch and find and follow us on social media too. All the details are in the show notes.
Peter Stoneley is a trading standards specialist, having spent his entire career working in consumer rights and fair trading law. And as a standards maker through CPIN, he has been instrumental in the development of ISO 21800. I spoke to Peter about the common challenges typically faced by consumers by online terms and conditions, how ISO 21800 will make things easier, and how the standard might promote greater transparency and build consumer trust in digital interactions. But I started by asking Peter, why is it important for consumers to understand online T's and C's?
I think it's quite simple, really. It's important because you need to know what you're signing up for. The biggest challenges are, first of all, finding the terms and conditions. I did some research on a large ticketing site last night, because I'll mention that later. And actually finding the actual terms and conditions took a lot of digging. It's usually in small print at the bottom of the website. To be fair, they've got lots of helpful hints and tips that I could look at, but I just wanted to see the whole thing, and it was hard to find. And that's me who had a purpose. So as a consumer, first of all, if you want to find them, you might have to work hard. But I think for many of us, actually reading terms and conditions is boring. We see contracts as things we sign with lawyers. It's our credit agreement. We don't see contracts as being when we order a widget over the phone. And that's the issue, really. I think understanding what we've signed up for is important. Okay, if you're on a major supermarket site and doing your weekly shop, you don't need to read terms and conditions that often. And the same, and I'll admit I don't read the terms when I'm buying my theatre tickets. I ought to, because they're going to tell me I can't resell them, not that I would want to. But if you're signing up for something like a gym or a mobile phone, what's your cancellation rights? How long notice do you have to give at the end of the year? What if you don't pay? And those are really important bits of information. The Competition and Markets Authority sometimes refer to some of these terms as ambush terms, which is you don't know they're there, but they might bite you when something goes wrong. And that's the difficulty. For consumers, sometimes you don't realize what you've signed up to, and sometimes they can be very sophisticated contracts, and you know what you're getting and you know you're paying them, but sometimes it's that what if bit. And I think that's the theme throughout all of this. We don't like the what if bits. We don't like that what if I can't afford to pay, what if I'm ill and can't go on holiday, and those are the bits that are become really important when they become really important, if that makes sense. But it would be better to know that beforehand, because maybe there are ways to cover that in another way or to avoid that. I'm involved in another sector where consumers are sometimes making an agreement with the provider because that's what they're encouraged to do, but actually there's a plan B which is more in their favour. So it's those kind of things. We're having to deal with a lot of sophisticated information as consumers, and that's a challenge sometimes for all of us.
Now, we've got this new standard in development, ISO 21800. Just wonder overall, in what ways will it help make online T's and C's clearer and more user-friendly for us consumers?
Yes, and that's very much the theme. It's been heavily influenced by a report by the UK Behavioural Insights team, which was back in 2019, and it was using behavioural economics or nudge theory to look at ways that we can nudge people towards reading terms and conditions to make them more appealing, more relevant, recognise the importance of them, and it comes up with probably a rather obvious set of best practice guidelines, things like use simple language, avoid jargon, keep terms and conditions short. Now, that's very hard if you're a mobile phone provider, but keeping them short encourages somebody to read them. Highlight key terms. So we see that a lot in the financial services industry now, where you'll see key term statements, which tells you the big things you need to know. And that's important. You need to know all the terms are there and they should always link, but knowing the big bits, what's really important to me. And that's the challenge for the business. What do their customers really need to know, rather than somewhat cynically sometimes, what can they perhaps hide away so customers aren't always aware of it? Bringing terms in the right part of the process. So when you're looking at placing your order, telling you, or do you know you can cancel? Using novel methods like cartoons to explain the cancellation process, using summary boxes for the big bits you need to know, FAQ pages, telling someone how long it will take to read it. I have to say that's one that I find interesting. I think if I look to the documents and it says it'll take you 30 minutes to read,
I suppose,
I'm not. Yeah,
I suppose some of them could be a lot longer than that, I would guess.
absolutely, yes. So it's a good idea, but also I think if I'm the business that's just about to add in, by the way, it'll take you 30 minutes to read this, good luck, then maybe it has a different effect, which is to go, my goodness, do we need to make it this long? Throughout all these hints and tips, always having a link back to the full terms and conditions, we should be able to find them easily. We shouldn't have to dig through the site to find a button that says terms and conditions. And you look at so many websites, it's down the bottom, it's small print. And that's something else that's a bee in my bonnet with businesses. And the ticket agency site I was looking at yesterday referred to the terms and conditions as small print. Well, that to me demeans them. It suggests they're not important. It's a kind of, do you want to read the small print? Well, actually, do you want to read the important terms and conditions? So it's all those things about getting into the head of a reader and encouraging them, almost making them enthusiastic about reading the terms and conditions. I probably sound like a boring
I was
law
about to
person saying that.
that is an interesting call to action out there, but you're right, isn't it? Because there's something about small print, but it's obviously negative terms. What can we get past the consumer without them noticing? Oh, if you want to read it, it's going to be in very small print at the bottom of the page, stuck somewhere where you really don't want to go. And that's really interesting, isn't it, that it's pitched in that negative way?
I think so. And okay, there's a certain trust factor. And, I'd admit that if I saw the tickets for a show on the website I looked at yesterday, I wanted to go to, I'd buy them, particularly as I only have 12 minutes to make my purchase. And I think it would take me about 30 minutes to read their terms. So I'm going to trust them. But there's a wider issue here for consumers. And I don't read terms and conditions. I should, but I don't. But I do when I'm dealing with a business that I haven't dealt with before, because I'm looking at it to find out who they are. And it's simple things like that. If I can't find terms and conditions that give me their address, give me, I know I've got rights to cancel. If they don't give me those rights, then it's a website that says to me, you know what, I don't want to deal with them. I'm not interested in any more terms and conditions. So I think they have lots of parts to play. And from a business perspective, it's about coming across well, encouraging customers to trust you, and both being clear about what you're signing up to.
Peter, I want to come back to trust later, but first, have you got any examples maybe where sort of vague terms and conditions, online terms and conditions, have actually harmed consumers? And I'm thinking maybe how this new standard could help avoid such situations.
Okay, well, I think the first thing we need to make clear, and it's been a very important international issue, we cannot deal with the sort of fairness or legality of terms and conditions. So we're looking at how the words are presented rather than what the words say, because that is very much down to domestic legislation. We have unfair terms legislation in the UK and across Europe, which is pretty much the same. So that's not our bit. Vagueness can actually go against both parties, and the business may not be able to enforce their contract, which forces them to write the terms properly, which can sometimes mean they're harder to read, if you see what I mean. It's a vicious circle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about how you put that across. The lawyers will tell you, and I've known it over the years, that legal writing is accurate. And I am, as a former law trainer, I tried to summarize some bits of law and found it took twice as long as what the law said. And that's the balancing act. I think vagueness doesn't help. It can cause unclear contracts, and that can sometimes really bite the trader later, but leads to disputes. And this whole thing is about do it properly, and you and your customer will get on and won't ever need to fall out. I think the standard will help avoiding it by, once you've written your terms and conditions, or even as you're writing your terms of conditions, you're always thinking about, okay, we've got all these words on paper and probably 3 sides of A4 looking at me now. How do I make them that someone wants to read them? Are the bits that are really important for them to know? And I would say to any business, you may know that by the sort of feedback you get from customers. So those are the sort of terms that people need to know. The simple things for me are how much is it going to cost me? What am I going to get? When am I going to get it? And if it's an ongoing contract, requirements to pay. When can I walk away? What happens if I don't pay? The lists are fairly clear, and for a business, and particularly a big business, they will probably know from their customer service side what things are upsetting customers, and they're the ones they need to think about. How can we help customers to avoid those issues? I think it's a lot harder for a smaller business. But I do encourage some sectors to write terms and conditions, particularly if it's, say, a service provider that's going into people's homes. They really need to be clear about each other's responsibilities, and it's almost less is more in these situations. So stick to the main bits you need, and don't go for fancy language. So it's that bit. If I was advising, say, a plumber, the contract would say, my responsibility is to do the job properly, to look after your home and so on. Your responsibility is to clear the room for us so we don't have to move stuff. Simple things like that. A contract doesn't have to be formal language. It has to set out the situation. And I think this standard may help that in getting people to look and think, well, maybe I could do it a different way, because I want, if I'm going to bother to write these, I'd like people to understand what we're signing up to as a pair, effectively.
Standards affect all of us every day, wherever we go, whatever we do. By defining good practice, they help people and organizations to do things better. Each year, standards bodies publish thousands of standards, and we are looking for more people like you to join our community of standards makers. We welcome applicants from all fields, backgrounds, and career stages. Our goal is a simple one: to have a balance of views around the table. By becoming a standards maker, you could help to improve the way things are made and done, like creating healthier and more inclusive workplaces, making advances in AI governance, improving product safety or online shopping experiences, or supporting vulnerable consumers, and many, many others. So if you want to make a difference and shape the world through standards, start your standards making journey now. Details of how to do so are in the show notes.
You mentioned earlier about this building sort of consumer trust, and obviously we're all using online services more and more. So we really want to, consumers want to have trust in all their sort of digital interactions. I just wonder overall, how might this standard promote, greater transparency and build that consumer trust in those digital interactions?
Yeah, I think it's a starting point. I would be naively optimistic if I thought it would solve the problems. I think it's a start to say to businesses, look, once you've made your terms fair, why don't you follow this international standard and claim compliance with it? And then we can look on the other side, and everyone who's involved in the education of consumers can refer to it. Look out for this standard. Is the trader complying with it? Because that's the bit we have to get. It's two sides. This standard can only make terms and conditions easier to read. Other people, and this isn't the job of the standard, have got to encourage consumers to read them. And this is not going to achieve that on its own, but seeing better practice. I think we would all be a bit worried if we saw an insurance contract now that didn't clearly tell us the key bits, because that's what we see all the time. So I think it's a drip, but every little helps, and this is helping the business do their bit to encourage us as consumers to act wisely, really.
So, Peter, I'm just wondering about this particular standard. How it feels like it really is breaking new ground.
Yeah, I think it is. It's been an interesting one for me, because I always think of standards as full of dimensions and things like that. And suddenly we have a standard which is just full of soft stuff. It's about summary boxes and clear writing and that. And a part of me sort of always thought, well, is this a standard? But then I step back and think, but that's what I want businesses to do. So I think it is breaking ground, because it's saying, yes, do all that boring writing and that, but here's a way of presenting it. So I think it's encouraging a new approach, and I'm very keen, once the standard's in, to work with my colleagues in trading standards and competition markets authority to say, when you're advising businesses about the how to make it legal bit, add in, and here's a way that you could make it easier for someone to find and read. That's got to be in your interest. And what's more, you could claim compliance with a standard. So I think it is breaking new ground, because it's going into an area that is sort of traditionally boring words and trying to make them interesting words and relevant words.
Peter, we're talking obviously ahead of publication of the standard. No organisation has adopted it yet and using it. I just wonder, not trying to look at this necessarily negatively, but it is breaking new ground here, as you say. What obstacles might arise in organisations adopting this standard?
I guess resistance to change. In the bigger businesses, and this isn't a judgment at all, these are being written by legal departments and they are used to doing what they do. And I know in many big businesses, there's a tension between legal and marketing that makes things attractive. And this is what I'm almost saying to the big legal departments. Market your terms and conditions, make them appealing, make them attractive. And here's some ways of doing it. So it's that bit about that you don't have to stop writing your terms and conditions. In fact, I don't want to not see a boring set of terms and conditions somewhere. What I want to see and what the standard is saying is, yes, you've got that. Try and make it as user friendly, avoid jargon, use short sentences, all those things. But at the same time, find ways of getting those key bits of information that customers need to know into their eyesight, almost so that without any effort at all, they can go, oh, I've got a right to cancel. Oh, if I do miss a payment, they're going to charge me. That's what they need to know. You look at a lot of terms and conditions, they've got lots of stuff in them around data protection, which I know is important, privacy, intellectual property rules, and so on. That needs to be there, but it may not be the most important information. So it's that sort of balancing and saying to a business, make a bit of effort now. And to be fair, some businesses do, to actually make these appealing. And the standard will give you lots of different ways of doing that. You don't have to use cartoons, it's something in the standard, but some key terms, what you really need to know, with a box with that information in and a link. And if you want to read your full terms and conditions, here they are, is what we're looking for. It's not hard. It's just a bit of a culture shift, I think.
So, Peter, obviously you've been involved in the development of this new and groundbreaking standard. I just wonder, crystal ball gaze for me here. Look forward, 3, 4, 5 years. Organisations have adopted this standard. What impact do you hope it to have had?
Well, I hope it means more people read contracts. It's as simple as that, and understand what they are getting themselves into. And I think that's the important point here, really. There are contracts that for all of us have bigger implications. I've mentioned things like mobile phone contract, gym contracts, and all those things. And so often, I'm a consumer and I do the same. We get really excited about the purchase. I want the latest whizzy phone. So I'm going to buy it through this deal. But do I know what I'm really letting myself in for? And that's the bit I'm hoping that we can get. It's about wiser consumers who understand what they are signing up to. And that leads, I think, to something we've kind of touched on, that if we can get consumers to understand things better, we may also get consumers to look at some online traders and go, this doesn't feel right. It's not what I'm used to seeing. I usually see information I can understand. And that's the wider bit about also, in a longer term, consumers learning without being told what good looks like, and maybe also then spotting the bad and walking away from them to say, well, actually, I'm not going to go on this business's site. It doesn't look right to me. And that would be my happy place in 4 or 5 years' time.
So, Peter, the standard will be published at some point this year, fingers crossed. I just wonder when that's done, what's next in terms of promoting and communicating the standard?
Yeah, well, I think I've certainly already started that work through CPIN and through my own contacts. We'll be speaking to the likes of Trading Standards, Competition and Markets Authority, other regulatory bodies that are involved in the terms and conditions business, to encourage them to use the standard. We want them to use it to encourage businesses, and that's the bit where we can get that push. I would love the day when I can see something on a Ofcom or Competition and Markets Authority website that says, here's our guidance on terms and conditions. And that includes a recommendation. You look up and follow the best practice guidance in ISO 21800. That will be what I would like to see, because the more we can get those bodies that can make an influence to push the standard, the more that we will get businesses actually doing so. And then it's the sort of snowball effect. That's what I'm hoping for.
Our thanks to Peter Stoneley for talking to us about ISO 21800. Now, to learn more about the standard, about how to get involved in standards, including through CPIN, and to explore other episodes in this series, then check out the links in the show notes. And a reminder that the show notes are also where you can find details of our socials and all the other ways to get in touch with us here on The Standard Show.
You have been listening to an episode of The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards, with Matthew Childs and Cindy Parakill.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.